This could be a very important week for TPGY, hopefully still merging with EVbox, of course, and we've got a lot to unpack today, so let's jump right into it. Let's first talk a little bit about the deadline, because when is the actual deadline? Well, as we mentioned in our previous video about TPGY, the so-called outside date, which is actually the deadline, is August 6th, so just in a few days on Friday, in 2 days already. Now, I believe there are two potential scenarios that have already happened or might actually happen in the future. The first scenario is that EVbox has already delivered the financial statements for 2020, so the audit for 2020. And it could be the case that the deadline for EVbox was actually on July 16th. Because keep in mind, August 6th is potentially, hopefully, the deadline for the entire deal to happen. And if you read through the SEC filing, then TPGY can have about 15 business days to look at those financial statements from EVbox and say whether they want to go on with the deal or not. So if you subtract 15 business days from August 6th, then you would arrive at the date of July 16th. And July 16th as well could be very well the date for EVbox to have already delivered the filings. Now the thing is, with regards to the August 6th date, it could be very well the case that we're not going to see an SEC filing talking about this merger, if it's going to be carried out or not. It could happen a little bit later, because if you recall the last time we had a deadline, I'm not entirely sure when that was, I believe somewhere in like June or maybe even May. The SEC filing came like 1 or even 2 business days later than the actual deadline. So if you don't hear anything from the SEC or from EVbox or from TPGY by this Friday, then, well, don't worry, it might happen on Monday or it might happen on Tuesday instead. So that is basically the first scenario that I see, that EVbox has already delivered the financial statements, that TPGY, the SPAC, is currently looking at those financial statements to decide whether they want to go on with the deal or not, and that they're actually going to communicate that to us right before Friday, on Friday, or potentially a few business days after Friday. The second deadline, according to my interpretation of this SEC filing, is that EVbox is going to deliver the financial statements on or right before this Friday, August 6th. And then TPGY can actually extend the deadline. So only the SPAC can do this. Only the SPAC can say, all right, we're going to need a little bit more time to look at these financial statements. So yeah, we need a lot, like 15 business days more to check out these audits. So that can definitely happen. In that case, then we might see an extension happen, another extension. We've already gone through so many extensions, but whatever. It might be the case that EVbox is going to deliver statements on Friday, or maybe a little bit later, maybe a little bit earlier, and then TPGY is going to extend the deadline again. So then in that case, we're also going to see another SEC filing, potentially on Friday, or again, a few business days after Friday. Now, what are the incentives for both parties involved? Well, we already talked a little bit about this in the previous video, so I'm just going to try to go through this very quickly. Basically, for EVbox, the incentives are as follows. If there is no deal, then EVbox is going to have to pay expenses. We talked about this in the previous video. Basically, what's going to happen is EVbox needs to pay at least 4.5 million euros at the minimum, and 12 million dollars or euros. Wow, 12 million euros at the most if there is no agreement, if there is no deal going to happen. So that could be one of the incentives for EVbox. Another incentive for that same company is that merging with a US company, and of course TPGY, the SPAC, is a US company, it makes it a little bit easier for EVbox to expand in the United States, which is definitely something that is in their roadmap. And another incentive is that if they get the deal, then of course they are going to have a lot of cash to play with, to use that for the expansion in the United States, but also to use that to basically compete with their competitors like ChargePoint, Tritium Charging, and Allego, which we're going to talk a little bit later on as well. So then what are the incentives for TPGY, the SPAC? Well, the thing is, if there is no deal going to happen, then, well, it's basically a waste of time, a waste of money for TPGY. And they would also lose out on a great deal, in my opinion. Because, in my personal opinion, EVbox is definitely one of the best SPAC deals out there, if you look at the valuation and if you compare that valuation to the competitors out there. The other thing is, another incentive for TPGY to go on with the merger is that if they don't have the merger, they would have to start the whole process, the whole SPAC process again from scratch. And that is quite difficult right at this moment, because the most solid companies have already found a SPAC to merge with. So it's going to be very difficult for TPGY to find a better deal than they have right now. So what if one of the parties is not happy with the deal after checking out those financial statements? Is it possible that they're going to revise the deal? Well, it does look that it is actually possible, because a few weeks ago, I think like 2 weeks ago, we heard the news about ACIC, which is a SPAC merging with Archer. And well, this is completely an entirely different company, but they did actually revise the agreement terms of the SPAC deal. They lowered the enterprise value of Archer by 38% from $2.7 billion to $1.7 billion. Now, this could definitely happen to EVbox as well. If the financial statements of 2020 of EVbox are better than expected, which I personally believe it's a little bit unlikely, but in that case, EVbox could maybe be looking for a better deal than they have right now. And if the financial statements are worse than expected, which in my opinion is very much possible, then I believe that TPGY, the SPAC, could be looking for a better deal. But what are insiders doing right now? Well, if you look at Light Street Capital Management, which is a 10% owner in TPGY, so a major shareholder, they are buying more and more shares in the last couple of weeks. From basically July 7th, they have been buying about, I think, like $4 million in shares. Now, personally, I don't care too much. It's just one person, one organization actually, that is buying up shares. And the thing is, they could be just looking at this deal from an expected point or an expected value point of view. It could be the case that they don't really know any more information than we do, but they're just looking at the numbers and they say, well, we believe it's more likely that this deal is going to go through than it is not going to go through. And if it's going to go through, this can go up a lot in a very short amount of time. And what does Engie say? Because Engie is the parent company of EVbox, and they recently showed their first half report of the first half of 2021, of course. And they said, well, yeah, we announced in December 2020 already that we were going to sell the majority of the group's interest in EVbox. And these transactions are expected to be completed in the second half of 2021. Now, they do say they expect it to happen, nothing definitive here, but it definitely sounds good still. And if you still weren't bullish enough about EVbox, check out this case study from Jabil. Jabil is the manufacturing partner for EVbox, and they're currently pushing out 10,000 charging stations per month. Now, some of these charging station companies, not EVbox, but some lower, smaller ones, they don't even have like 20, 30,000. And here EVbox is getting like 10,000 per month from Jabil. So that is quite insane to see. Ultimately, they're going to reach 200,000 charging stations per year, which is about like 16.6 thousand per month. Quite insane to see. And something else that's interesting from this case study is the following sentence, that following EVbox's recent expansion into North America, the team is also preparing for manufacturing at a Jabil facility in Mexico. So this looks to be the case that EVbox is going to expand more and more in North America. Let's then also quickly go over another SPAC which has just entered the domain of charging stations and merging with SPACs, of course. This is Allego, which is merging with SPAQ, so SPAC, actually a quite a funny abbreviation for a SPAC. But this is a very big player in the Netherlands, the country where I live. They already have 26,000 public charging ports and also 12,000 public and non-public sites across 12 countries. As you can see, they are mainly operating in Europe. But yeah, if you compare this to EVbox still has way more charging stations compared to Allego. And Allego currently has a pro forma market cap of $3.14 billion, which almost is twice as much compared to TPGY, hopefully still merging with EVbox. And they have a revenue of about 86 million euros in 2021, hopefully, expected revenue, of course, which is like $100 million, of course. And that gives you a price to sales ratio of 31, which is more or less like ChargePoint. I believe ChargePoint is a little bit more expensive still, but TPGY's EVbox has only a price to sales ratio of 12 right now. And just a little fun fact, if you look at the valuation benchmarking page in the investor presentation of Allego merging with SPAC, SPAQ, then we see that EVbox is not even in there. Well, it kind of makes sense because EVbox would look a lot cheaper compared to Allego. So yeah, it does make sense that EVbox is not on this page. So you might be wondering, what did I do exactly? Well, I didn't sell a single share so far. I explained this a little bit in the previous video where I talked about the expected value. Like, if we don't see a merger, that's definitely going to suck, because then we would go down like another probably like 15-20% to about $10 per share. But if we do succeed, then I do expect a very quick move up, like 100% or potentially even 200% at some point. Because if you look at the price to sales ratio for ChargePoint, it is like 37 right now, and for EVbox it is about 12 right now. So that means that EVbox would be 3 times as cheap compared to ChargePoint right now. So yes, we do have a couple of very interesting days ahead for TPGY, hopefully merging with EVbox. It could definitely happen. We're going to see a merger agreement on potentially, well, Friday or maybe even Monday or Tuesday, but it could also be very well the case that we're going to get an SEC filing, that we're going to get another extension for TPGY to look at the financial statements of EVbox. Now, if you missed the previous video about TPGY where I talked about my expected value model, then definitely check out the video right here, and if not, then check out my mission and my roadmap to carry out my mission right here. And with that being said, thank you very much for taking your time to watch this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye!